From the moment I was old enough to understand what favoritism meant, I knew my parents had a favorite, and it wasn't me. My sister Samantha had always been the sun that lit up every room she entered. She had that easy kind of beauty, soft curls that bounced when she laughed, a smile that could charm even the coldest heart, and a voice that made people lean in just to hear her speak. I was quieter, softer, the kind of daughter who did everything right, but never quite right enough. When we were little, Samantha's drawings were framed and hung in the hallway. Mine were stacked in a box to be organized later. When she came home with average grades, Mom would say, "Samantha has other talents." But if I got a 95 instead of a 100, Dad would sigh and say, "You're slipping, Emily." I used to think it didn't matter, that love wasn't a competition. But I learned quickly that in our house, love was measured in attention, applause, and money. The years rolled by, and Samantha's life unfolded like a fairy tale, while mine felt like a quiet background story. When she graduated from college, my parents threw a party with white tents, fairy lights, and a string quartet. When I graduated, we had takeout pizza at home because money was tight that month. I told myself I didn't mind. I was proud of her. I thought that was what love meant, being happy for someone, even when you're invisible beside them. Then came her engagement. It was announced at one of my parents' dinner parties, the kind with crystal glasses and guests who spoke in polished tones. Samantha's fiancé, Ryan, stood up holding her hand and said, "I want to marry the most beautiful woman in the world." Applause erupted. Champagne glasses clinked. My parents cried real tears, the kind I'd never seen from them before. Mom hugged Samantha, whispering, "You deserve the world, sweetheart." I remember standing near the kitchen doorway, smiling politely, trying not to notice how no one looked my way. The next few months were a blur of wedding preparations. My parents poured money into it like water, $332,000 extravaganza. A destination wedding in Italy, 5-star hotel bookings, designer gowns, a 10-tier cake, and a fireworks show that lit up the night sky like a fairy tale ending. Dad handled it all with pride. My daughter's wedding should be unforgettable, he said. I helped where I could, making lists, booking flights, running errands, though no one asked me to. Samantha once laughed and said, "You'd make a great assistant, Em." That hurt more than I admitted. At the wedding, everything shimmered, chandeliers hanging from olive trees, soft music echoing through the vineyards, Samantha walking down the aisle like a goddess in lace. I watched from the second row, my dress borrowed, my heart quietly breaking, as everyone toasted the perfect couple. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat. I thought about the student loans I was still paying off, the apartment I could barely afford, the second-hand shoes on my feet. When it was my turn to hug Samantha, she smiled and whispered, "Don't cry, Em. You'll have your day too." But her tone wasn't comforting, it was pitying. As if my life were a placeholder until something worthy came along. That night, back in my small hotel room, I looked out at the fireworks bursting over the Tuscan hills. My parents were probably laughing somewhere, glasses raised high, celebrating their golden daughter. And I, the other daughter, sat in silence, the glow of the fireworks reflecting in my eyes like tiny shards of a heart breaking quietly. Still, I told myself it didn't matter, that love wasn't about money or weddings or being the favorite. I told myself that someday, when life tested us, my parents would see me truly see me, and remember that love should be unconditional. I was wrong. The years after Samantha's wedding passed quietly. I built my life from the ground up, one small step at a time. My husband, Mark, and I weren't rich, but we were happy. We lived in a small townhouse, the kind with creaky floors and a tiny garden that bloomed every spring. And in that little world, my daughter Lily was the brightest light. She was born on a rainy afternoon, crying with all the strength of the world inside her tiny lungs. The moment I held her, I promised myself I would love her the way I'd always wanted to be loved, without comparison, without condition, without end. When Mark died in a car accident 3 years later, that promise became my anchor. I worked 2 jobs, one at the community library, another managing online clients at night. It was exhausting, but Lily's laughter made every moment worth it. She was 5 when it happened. One evening, she fainted while drawing in the living room. Her little body went limp in my arms, her lips pale. The world blurred into sirens, cold hospital walls, and doctors speaking too fast for me to keep up. They said she had a congenital heart defect, one that had gone undetected until now. She needed surgery. Urgent, the kind that couldn't wait months. I remember gripping the edge of the doctor's desk, my voice shaking. "How much?" $50,000, he said gently. "We can't delay, Mrs. Carter. Without it, her chances." He didn't need to finish. I saw it in his eyes. I nodded, pretending to be strong, but inside I was crumbling. $50,000. It might as well have been 5 million. That night, I stared at Lily sleeping under the pale hospital light, machines beeping beside her. I thought about all the ways I'd scraped by for years, every bill I'd stretched, every meal I'd skipped so she'd have more. And now I was supposed to find 50,000 in days, so I did the hardest thing I'd ever done. I called my parents. Mom answered on the second ring, her voice warm and distracted. "Emily, sweetheart, it's been ages. How's my Lily? I swallowed hard." "Mom, she's sick, really sick. She needs heart surgery, and oh my God," she gasped. "That's awful. What kind of surgery?" I told her everything. Every terrifying detail. When I finished, my voice broke. "I've raised 10,000 already, but I need help, please. I need 40,000 more." There was silence. Then a sigh. "Emily, you know your father's retired now." She began slowly. "We've already helped Samantha a lot this year." My throat tightened. "Mom, I'm not asking for a handout. I'll pay it back, every dollar. Please, it's Lily's life." "I understand, but you can't expect us to just pull out that kind of money. We have investments, responsibilities." I could barely hear her over the sound of my heartbeat in my ears. "You spent 330, 2,000 on Samantha's wedding." The words came out sharper than I intended. Her tone cooled instantly. "That was different, Emily. A wedding is a celebration, something joyful. This is unfortunate, but we can't empty our savings every time there's a problem." I couldn't breathe. Then I heard my father's voice in the background. "Is that Emily? What's she asking for now?" "She needs money," Mom whispered. He sighed audibly. "Tell her we're not a bank, she's an adult." I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. The next day, I got a call from Samantha. Her voice was smooth, pitying. Mom told me about Lily. That's so sad, but you can't expect them to fix everything. You've always had this habit of depending on people. Depending." I repeated, numb. "I'm asking for help to save your niece's life." She chuckled softly. "You always make things sound so dramatic. You know, if you had made better choices, you wouldn't be in this position." Something in me snapped. "I hope." I said quietly, "You never have to choose between pride and your child's heartbeat." She didn't reply, just sighed and said, "Good luck," before hanging up. For 2 days, I sat beside Lily's bed, my head spinning with fear and anger. I sold everything I could: jewelry, Mark's old tools, my laptop. Friends from work donated what they could. I started a fundraiser online, swallowing every ounce of pride I had left. And somehow, miraculously, strangers stepped in. People I barely knew gave $10, $20, $50. My small town rallied around me, sharing Lily's story, posting prayers. A woman from the library baked cupcakes to raise money. The mechanic who fixed my car handed me an envelope with $300 and said, "For your little girl." It wasn't fast, but it was enough. In 10 agonizing days, I had what we needed. The surgery was long, 10 hours of silence, coffee, and trembling hands. When the doctor finally came out, smiling, I broke down. "She's strong," he said. "She made it." I remember pressing my forehead against Lily's small hand, tears spilling onto her bandaged fingers. I whispered, "You're safe now. Mommy's here. Mommy's not going anywhere." But deep inside, something inside me had changed. The love I had for my parents, the hope that they'd someday treat me like I mattered, died that week. They didn't even call to ask if she survived. When I walked out of that hospital, I wasn't the same woman who had gone in. Something in me, something that had always tried to forgive, to understand, to be patient, was gone. All that was left was a quiet, cold resolve. If love could be bought, then I no longer wanted theirs. If compassion had a price tag, I was done paying. And someday, I promised myself, they would understand the true cost of turning their backs on me. 2 years passed after Lily's surgery, and every single day felt like a small miracle. She grew stronger, her cheeks flushed with life again. She laughed freely, ran through the garden barefoot, and drew little hearts on the fridge with her crayons. Sometimes I'd stand at the doorway, watching her, and think, she's my reason for everything. After what happened with my parents, I never called them again. They didn't visit Lily in the hospital. They didn't send a card, not even a message. Silence, that was their choice. So I learned to live without them. I poured my pain into progress. I started a small business designing and selling handmade home decor. It began as a weekend project, just me and my old laptop. But when a local influencer posted about my work, everything changed. Orders started pouring in. I worked late nights, often until dawn, but it didn't feel like work. It felt like freedom. Soon, I hired 2 employees, then 5. Within 3 years, my business Lily and Lace Designs was thriving. We had contracts with boutiques, wedding planners, and even hotel chains. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was now creating beauty for weddings, the same kind of celebrations my parents once said were worth spending on. Only this time, the beauty was mine. Earned, not gifted. I moved us into a cozy house with white walls and a backyard full of wildflowers. Lily had her own room painted sky blue, and every night we'd sit by her window watching the stars. Mom, she'd ask sometimes, why don't we visit Grandma and Grandpa anymore? I'd pause, my chest tightening. Because, sweetheart, sometimes people forget what love means. And when they do, you have to love yourself enough to walk away. She'd nod solemnly, as if she understood more than her young heart should. I thought peace had finally found me. But peace, I learned, has a way of being tested. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon. Emily, the voice was hesitant, familiar. My mother, I froze. It had been almost 3 years since I'd heard her voice. Mom, oh, thank God you picked up, she said quickly, her tone fragile. We've been going through some trouble. Your father, he's been under a lot of stress. The business isn't doing well, and I felt a flicker of confusion. Business, you told me he retired. Well, she stammered, he tried to invest some of our savings to help Samantha and Ryan with their new company. But it didn't go as planned. There it was. The golden child again. What happened? I asked, though a part of me already knew. Her voice broke. The company collapsed. Ryan left Samantha. He took most of the money and filed for divorce. Your father had taken loans to support them, and now the creditors are, Emily, we're going to lose the house. A silence. I stood there in my studio, surrounded by boxes of my new product line, unable to believe what I was hearing. Emily, she whispered, we need help. Please. You've always been good with money. Maybe you could lend us something, just until we get back on our feet. I couldn't stop the bitter laugh that slipped out. You need help, Emily, please, Mom. I interrupted. 2 years ago, my daughter was dying. I begged you for help. You told me weddings were worth celebrating, but illness was just unfortunate. Her breathing hitched. We didn't mean, yes, you did. I said quietly, you meant every word. You made a choice. Now you're asking me to make mine. There was a long pause, and then her voice softened. The same tone she used when I was little and she wanted something. Emily, we're still your parents. You can't just abandon us. Parents protect their children, I replied. Not the other way around. Before she could answer, I ended the call. That night, I sat in my living room long after Lily had gone to bed, the darkness pressing against the windows. My emotions tangled between anger and pity. Part of me wanted to ignore them forever. Another part, the one that still longed for closure, wanted to see them, face to face, not as the broken little girl who needed their love, but as the woman who had survived without it. So, a week later, I agreed to meet them. They looked smaller than I remembered. Time had drawn lines on their faces, the kind that no amount of wealth could hide. Samantha was there too, mascara smudged, her once perfect smile trembling. Emily, my father began, his voice rough. We made mistakes, we know that, but we need help now. The bank is about to seize the property. Samantha leaned forward. I just need enough to start fresh. You've done so well for yourself. You have more than enough to help family. Family. The word felt bitter on my tongue. I looked at them, the same people who once told me my child's life wasn't worth $50,000. Now here they were, begging for more than that to save their house and their pride. In that moment, I realized something. Life has a way of balancing its scales. You don't always need to lift a sword to get revenge. Sometimes, time does it for you. I took a deep breath. I'll think about it, I said, standing up, but if I help, it'll be on my terms. They nodded eagerly, not realizing the quiet storm behind my calm voice. As I walked out of that cafe, the wind brushing against my face, I felt the final thread of my old self snap. The obedient daughter was gone. The invisible girl had vanished. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth and the price of betrayal. I didn't sleep that night after meeting them. Their words replayed in my mind, not because I felt pity, but because it was strange seeing them stripped of everything they once used to define themselves: wealth, pride, and control. For the first time in my life, they were the ones looking up at me, and it wasn't satisfying. It was quiet. Over the next few days, I thought about what to do. Part of me wanted to turn away completely, to let them feel the cold indifference they once showed me. But another part, the part that had learned compassion the hard way, didn't want to become like them. Revenge, I realized, didn't have to be cruel. It just had to be fair. So I called my lawyer. We drafted a legal agreement, detailed, binding, and unflinching. If I was going to help them, it wouldn't be through guilt or emotion. It would be through structure. The next week, I met them again at my office. My business had grown into a small company by then, complete with a reception area, staff, and a wall lined with awards and photographs of smiling clients. The contrast wasn't lost on me once. I'd been the daughter they pitied. Now, I was the woman they depended on. My mother looked around the room, clearly uncomfortable. My father sat stiffly across the table, his pride barely holding together. Samantha avoided my eyes, her fingers fidgeting with her purse strap. I placed the folder on the table. "This is a loan agreement," I said evenly. "You'll find every term clearly listed. I'm willing to help you cover your debts, but it comes with interest, 10% annually. Payment begins in 6 months. If you default, I'll have full claim to your remaining assets, including the house." My mother gasped. "Emily, how could you? We're family." I met her gaze steadily. "You're right, and family should help when it matters most. You didn't when my daughter's life was on the line. I'm helping you now. The difference is, I'm doing it responsibly." My father slammed his hand on the table. "This is humiliation." "No," I said quietly. "This is accountability." Samantha finally looked up, tears gathering in her eyes. I know we've been awful. I know. But please don't do this to Mom and Dad." I studied her for a moment. The same sister whose wedding they'd spent $332,000 on, while my child had been left to die for 50. I almost felt sorry for her, almost. "I'm not doing anything to them," I replied softly. "I'm just treating them the way they treated me, as a choice, not a priority." The room fell silent. After a long pause, my father muttered something about dignity and stormed out. My mother followed, crying quietly. Samantha lingered a little longer. "You really hate us, don't you?" she whispered. I shook my head. "No, I just finally love myself enough not to beg for yours." The months that followed felt strangely peaceful. My parents signed the contract, their pride folded beneath necessity. I paid off their debts, and true to the agreement, they began sending payments 6 months later, smaller than expected, but consistent. Samantha tried to rebuild her life, moving into a modest apartment. Every so often, she'd call to ask how Lily was doing. I never turned her away. I didn't have the heart to be cruel, not anymore. Because revenge, I'd learned, isn't about destroying others. It's about reclaiming yourself. One evening, I found myself sitting with Lily on the porch. The sky was painted in shades of orange and rose, the kind of sunset that makes you forget the world for a moment. She was 9 now, her laughter brighter than ever. She leaned against me and asked softly, "Mom, why don't we see Grandma and Grandpa anymore?" I looked at her, those gentle brown eyes, so full of innocence, and smiled faintly. Because, sweetheart, I said, brushing a strand of hair from her face, some people love only when it's easy. But real love, the kind you give, that's the kind that saves lives. She nodded slowly, as if understanding something deep she couldn't yet explain. Will you ever forgive them? She asked. I stared out at the horizon, where the sun was slipping behind the trees. Maybe, I said, but forgiveness isn't for them, Lily. It's for us, and we've already moved on. A few weeks later, I received a letter handwritten, shaky, signed by my father. He apologized for the words he'd said, for the choices they'd made, for not showing up when it mattered. At the bottom, he wrote, "You were the strong one all along. We just didn't see it until life forced us to." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a box labeled Lily's Memories, not because I wanted to remember the pain, but because it was part of what shaped us. That night, I stood by Lily's bedside, watching her sleep, her small chest rising and falling steadily. The same rhythm that once cost me sleepless nights, endless tears, and every ounce of strength I had. I whispered into the quiet, "You were worth everything they couldn't give." Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the faint scent of jasmine, calm, forgiving, endless. For years, I had chased their love like it was something I needed to survive. But now I understood I had built something greater, a life, a home, and a heart free from their approval.